What was that material that you showed?
The Flexico?
No, a little pot.
Does anyone work it out?
Is it magnetic?
No. It's a natural material. It's
Oh,
Silk with the worm inside.
yeah. Silk with the worm inside. Yeah.
Thank you.
The dead one.
Thanks.
It is dead.
It is dead.
I have some questions for the panel then, or a question to start off. Relative to seeing this within your own practices, relative to seeing this wide variety of practice and vocabulary, how do you, and all of you talked about this, how do you navigate that relative to your own work, right? So understanding how, whether it's clients approach this and explaining your process, or Chris, in your case, just communicating that to other people relative to the narrative structures you've used. How have you navigated that through your own practices to develop the dialogue you have today? Anyone?
Chris.
Okay. Well, I think it's. So the question, if I understand, is how do we entwine the research with I guess commercial practice?
How did you end up here? I mean, we've all been in, you've all presented this where you are now today, but I think a lot of questions for our students and people that are in the middle of their practices is, okay, how did this happen over your practice, and how did you develop this language and this approach? What are some of the challenges or myths?
It's a very hard question to answer, because I think that personally, I don't know if this applies to everybody else, but I tend not to follow a very sort of focused pathway. I tend to sort of just jump in and play, try this, and then try and I guess make connections between different things. As a kind of stumbling along, I think would be a good way of describing it. But I think that comes down to the non-commercial, the research-led, theoretical kind of approach that research offers, as opposed to the commercial projects. But I suppose I do feel very fortunate, because I've worked as an industrial designer on very commercial projects, and there is a huge world of difference between those types of projects in terms of client expectation and the kind of projects, commercial projects that I'm doing now. And I find that it's just much easier to kind of fuse these, pure research, non-commercial research with commercial projects. The peach thing and the Oreo and the ham, that was a commercial project. That was really just an extension of what I was doing. And the question, the client, the question was how can we entice designers to kind of look at our stuff, our material a bit more, and it was really just kind of playing research into that part. And if I'm doing I guess a workshop with a client, a commercial client, a big studio, design studio, materials workshop, it's again, how do you facilitate a kind of creative process within the designer's minds that opens up the potential of materials and finds applications where perhaps there were previously none, for a material or in an industry.
Sure. Anyone else? Yeah. So, is this on?
Yes.
So, in our practice, or actually it started in architecture school, just a real frustration with kind of always describing the kind of quantities of a place and kind of wanting to be able to describe the qualities of a place. And so I think that really kind of started, for me at least, a need to kind of work tactily and get out of the computer and get out of the sheet of paper and have kind of a real one-to-one type of experimentation going on. But I think it is this is a kind of an emerging profession in a way of working with materials, and nobody's quite sure what hat they're wearing at what point in time. Sometimes we talk about ourselves as artists, sometimes we're talking about ourselves as manufacturers, sometimes as consultants, and it's really, it really depends on the context, and I think it's something that in 10 years there'll be a lot more clarity on what types of roles kind of are being played at different times.
I think there's kind of two answers. I think there's an educational sort of process I want to answer, because that's pretty much my role now, but also an opportunity in the professional world as well. I think as much information and as many different perspectives that can come to the table, having diverse amounts of information collide together, i.e. design storms. It's kind of getting messy, it's becoming very immersive, but doing everything you can to bring as many pieces of information to the table and do something with it. You know, bring as many ingredients to mix up something that is very interesting at the end. And I find that what the students are doing here with the most interesting projects, I mean, we kind of talked, making jokes about the Fruit Loops and the Cheerios and the machine nuts, but that did lead to something, and we're starting to see how that divergent thinking is actually producing some really cool stuff. I mean, I can point to a dozen different projects in here right now that show that kind of thinking. On the professional side, I think we're in an era where, and I mentioned before, the professional life of a color material designer. A decade ago, and I didn't know what a color material designer was when I graduated here 10 years ago or so. That's a great field, and it's a discovery role. And what the color material designer is doing is they're taking a brief and they're actually looking at what emerging technologies are, color forecasting, trends, consumer insights, and they're mixing all these great things together. And I think finally that kind of process is emerging as the key differentiator in a product experience, an automotive interior, an environment, you name it. So I think we're kind of now just starting to sort of see that as a great opportunity here for all kinds of different perspectives to get involved. And then we throw sustainability in the mix, and that's a whole other big conversation to have. So.
Anybody else? Questions? So since you brought it up, one of the things that I really valued about today in your conversation is each of you kind of touched on sustainability, and it's something that came up in our early conversations as a group. Relative to sustainability, all of you talked about that as a process or a point of view or a way of engaging designing as opposed to a movement or a trend or a selection of material, i.e. a palette of some sort. And that's a little different than what we're used to hearing things about. Would any of you like to kind of expand on that at all and talk a little bit more about, yeah, sure. Try and talk loud into that.
Talk loud? Is it even on?
Is it on?
Okay. Does that thing work better?
Yeah, I think it might. Give it a try, just hit the button.
Okay. Ooh.
Yes, much better.
It's better. So get smart. I think that, and this kind of gets back into a lot of conversations actually when, right around the design conference time, we had Tim Brown here from IDEO, as most of you know, and we were fortunate enough to have a very lovely conversation with him regarding where design is going. And it really is about empathy. It's about looking at social responsibility, and the combination of that kind of equals sustainable design. So it goes far beyond just calling out green materials.
Sure.
It's really, truly a holistic process and approach. Right. And as I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of what our faculty are teaching here is just that. I think we've gone way beyond. I think even a year or two ago, we could still call sustainability a trend. It's just not a trend anymore. It's infused in everything that we do now. And designers have that opportunity to actually visualize what that means. We're not there yet, but we're getting there, making progress.